Hello, I am Matt Williamson. How's everyone doing today? Almost combine time. We're getting to the end of this week, and then things get ramped up in a big way. Really good questions from you guys. Some of them centered around why hasn't Justin Fields been signed yet? Go back and listen to yesterday's podcast. I really dug into the contracts and nuts and bolts of that, if in fact Fields is their guy. But Joey Bag of Donuts asks, does not having a good number 2 wide receiver torpedo the Steelers' offense last year? And it sounds like a simple question. You know, like, well, they weren't very good at number 2 receiver. Was the offense really, greatly affected? But I think there was, and I think Joey's asking this, from this perspective too, is I think there was more of a ripple effect than you even can imagine. Like we know that Arthur Smith likes heavier sets, a lot of tight ends on the field, 2-3 tight ends on the field, of course. But if you go back and even watch his Tennessee tape, he wasn't as adverse to 11 personnel as you might think. I kind of think his hand was forced a little, that he didn't want to put a lot of poor players on the field with, third receivers, the Van Jeffersons of the world, those type of guys. Plus, the Steelers were near the top of the league in running into loaded boxes. And you can blame the quarterbacks, you can blame the play calling. But sometimes it was just, if we're going to run the ball, it's going to be against loaded boxes because there's nobody fearing our, especially intermediate passing game, but our downfield passing game or our number 2 receivers overall. And clearly, when Pickens got hurt, which anyone could have seen in June, July, August coming, that Pickens gets hurt, the offense torpedoes, to be kind. So yes, and I think the short answer is yes. The long answer is yes. And there's a lot of ripple effects to it. Plus, clearly, if you had a legit number 2, I don't need Randy Moss over there. It would be nice. Pickens would have so much more one-on-one. And especially when Wilson was a quarterback, the ball would have went there. You know what I mean? Think about how his production would have spiked. So good question. The PEF asks, would it be more likely for the Steelers to trade up or trade back in the first round of the 2025 draft if they had to do one or the other? Well, across the league, my thoughts with this specific draft class are teams are going to want to trade down. So it might be somewhat of a buyer's market compared to other years for trade up teams. That being said, I definitely think trading down makes way more sense for the Steelers as we sit here in the mid to late February, in that you could add a lot of things. An extra second day pick could go a long way, in terms of that's a corner you wouldn't have got, or you know what I mean? That being said, this isn't as obvious as an answer as I would have on first blush. I immediately said, trading down for sure. Yeah, maybe, but we've seen Omar trade up in the first round. We also know that the Steelers have a lot of cap space and can create a lot of cap space. So what if corner and wide receiver and a couple of your own are already in tow, which isn't asking that much on draft day. And I keep coming back to Walter Nolan, that the defensive tackle out of Mississippi, that the more I watch him, the more I study this class as a whole and this defensive tackle class, the less likely I think he's going to be there at 21. So if Nolan, as I suspect, is the second D tackle off the board, and there isn't one that you do jumping jacks for as the third D tackle off the board, maybe that's Grant from Michigan, somebody like that. Maybe you then trade down a few spots to get Grant, that third D tackle, or, PEF. Maybe you're in pretty good shape and you can afford in a buyer's market to go up 5 spots to get the guy you adore in Nolan. And frankly, I don't know if that's who their target is, and they probably don't either at this point. But he's my target at this moment. And I think he is a extremely high upside potential Cam Hayward replacement guy to groom type. That's pretty attractive to me. So that would be the guy, that maybe you do go get. I can't imagine trading up for Genty or a quarterback, or, so I would have to think Nolan would be my target. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. My apologies, a little sniffly. I think I'm coming down with a little something. I'm going to be fighting like everyone else on the planet, but oh well. Hessian asks, hey Matt, as per usual, the social media rhetoric is that the O-line needs to be overhauled. I'm still ecstatic we may have gotten 3 full-time starters from the last draft, and I'm enthused about their growth, hopefully along with Jones being back on the left. Your thoughts? Thanks. Yeah, I'm more with you. I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect or don't worry about O-line. It's going to be fine. Daniels leaves, Moore leaves, and you're going to be in great shape. That's not what I'm saying. But I think when Omar took over, or when this last 2 years kicked off, his reign, we knew the O-line was going to be a work in progress and they were going to throw a lot of high resources in it. And that's exactly what's happened. So let the work progress. You know what I'm saying? These guys are really young, especially Jones, for his level of experience or how long he's been in the league. Now, I do think Omar, which I agree with, is big on, okay, we look set on the O-line, but I'm going to throw a 4th round pick on top of it. Just a little something extra. And I love that. And I could see that as well. And I also don't know that Siamalu's definitely not a long-term answer, but maybe you're on borrowed time with him. It's possible. So I'm with you for the most part that let's see how it plays out. Now, that doesn't mean let's ignore it. And I'd like to bring Herbig back as well. But I do think it's not as dire as most people think. I think people watch the Super Bowl and the Eagles and say, just draft every lineman you possibly can. And I'm not even saying that's wrong. But I'm more so on the D front in terms of adding linemen in this offseason than I am the O front. Matt Sabo asks, I know you said the Steelers don't play a 3-4 as much now. Can you explain the defensive line positions? There's nose and end, but also interior tackles along with Watt and Highsmith rushing. I'm confused how they all fit together and what needs we have in the draft because of it. I get why you would be, because it's much vaguer now than the LeBeau era, where some teams had no use for Casey Hampton because they didn't want a true plugging nose. The Steelers DNs back then all had to be 6'4 plus with long arms. And so many teams around the league didn't want the Gildens and Porters because they were too light for a 4-3 end, and the Steelers sucked them up as 3-4, quote, outside linebackers. So, Matt, I mean, more often than not, most teams are in a 4-man front, with nickel or dime personnel. I mean, that's just what the league is now. And I don't think the Steelers have it close to as extreme a need or desire for Joel Steed or Casey Hampton. And they also don't want their defensive linemen back in the day, and they were so good at it. Their 3 linemen often would occupy all 5 offensive line blocks, with Hampton just gobbling up 2 every time. That's not what they ask of them anymore. They want more upfield penetrators. So really, the distinction between 3-4 and 4-3 is just much foggier now than it was. But in their base, they have 3 290 plus, 300-pound type dudes and 2 edges, and everyone always has 2 edges, and the Steelers are a little lighter than most. They're not 280-pound guys, Watt and Highsmith and Herbig, etc., because they're playing a 5-2, basically, and that's a way to look at it. But I do wonder because I think Benton in the base, in the 3-4, would be better off as an end, which really means just a D tackle, not a nose. That I wonder if they do go get a Kenneth Grant or a big-bodied run stuffer to try to eliminate what we saw Derrick Henry do, obviously. So it's not what it used to be. And basically, I always look at the defense as 2 true linebackers on the field, whether there's 5 D-backs in front of them or 4 behind them or 4. And usually it's a 4-man front, and that's basically what the league plays with as a whole. But the Steelers will put out a little bit different personnel than Joe Blow 4-3. And frankly, you don't see many 3 off-the-ball linebacker situations, Ham, Lambert, and Russell, like you used to, that's for sure. Speaking of linebackers, Mason Rudolph's burner asks, could you talk about our new inside line coach, Scott McCurley? I don't know if that's been officially announced, but it sure sounds like it's a done deal. And it makes me very happy. But I don't know a whole lot about Scott other than the 3 years I was at Pitt overlapped with him as a player. So he was beloved on the team. I'm sure he'll be the first to tell you he wasn't the greatest linebacker or athlete in the Big East at that point, or even on our team. We had 2 guys that played ahead of him that went to the pros, Gerald Hayes and more. But McCurley was really smart, really hardworking, all the coach stuff you would expect, to put it mildly. And he's gone on to make a name for himself, and I am excited to reintroduce myself to him next time I see him at the facility, and when that becomes official. That was 20 years ago when he was a player at Pitt, but I could certainly see him translating to being a good coach, hoping the best for him, to say the least. I mean, Luke Getsy's another one in the league that was on those Pitt teams when I was there, and it's pretty cool, to be honest with you. I mean, I GA'd with Ben McAdoo, who went on to be the head coach for the Giants and still in the league. Again, these were 20 years ago, though, folks. Last thing I got here is from my man, Michael Odesso. I'm sure you're getting really excited for the Combine and the St. Elmo Shrimp Cocktail, which is unbelievable. And yes, the food across the board is one of the highlights, the dinners. Are there any specific players you're looking to be focused on? Any media people you're looking to see? I'll probably do a Combine preview and pick like 10 to 20 players that Steeler related, of course, that the Combine I'm looking for how well they throw it against other quarterbacks, what their length is, what their 3-cone is, something specific on that. So I'll get to that. But I will say one of my highlights of the year every year is going to Indy, and I'm on the radio, I think 5 hours a day. And we have coverage, basically 8 hours a day, that I snag really, really good guests. I mean, Greg Cosell is probably my favorite guy we talk to, but Matthew Berry, Cynthia Freeland, Draftniks galore. I mean, Dane Brugler, the guys from PFF. I mean, so we talked to fantastic guests there. And some reporter types, that are breaking news and seeing them at the bars. And I'm hearing that this team loves Sam Darnold, blah, 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 blah. But there's a lot of chatter behind the scenes. There's a lot to be had. I always run into Mike Sando and, guys that are in the know. And I certainly will have some nuggets for you, but we'll have a lot of on-air back and forth and deep questions, X's and O's stuff, draft prospect breakdowns. And I come back kind of a new man from Indy, in terms of I just learned a lot while I was there. Can't wait. And I'm sure I'll be podcasting from my hotel room. I just don't know what my schedule will be, but you'll still get them the next day. I'll record them in the evenings or whatever like this. All right, everyone, take care.